Okay, if everybody please rise and we'll do a pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now I'd like to have a presentation by Dave from RPI.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good to see you all here for steering committee meeting number 2 for the Safe Streets for All action plan for Cape Island. I am Dave Kuhn. I am the project manager for the project. I'm with GPI, and along with me from GPI are Julia Stepanenko, Jocelyn Bello, and Dale Foster, who many of you may know. So they're all part of our team working under contract to the city of Cape May. So what we want to do today, how many people have not been part of this to this point? All right, so there's a couple new people, so we'll take a couple minutes and we'll try to bring you up to speed very briefly. But what we want to come out of today's meeting with is we want to get the committee's, general approval and other thoughts on infrastructure locations. We want to talk about and get some input on non-infrastructure strategy priorities to make Cape Island roads safer. And we want to try to set a fatal and serious injury reduction goal for the plan. So those are the 3 things we want to come out of here today with. So our agenda is, just talk about the objectives. I'll give you a little briefing on progress to date, bring some folks up to speed on the plan, what it is. We're going to talk about equity analysis, the results of that, candidate locations, non-infrastructure strategies, the plan goal, and then next steps. Questions on the agenda? Everybody good? Okay. So where we are, background for those that are new, what is a local safety action plan? So this is a Safe Streets for All grant and to do this action plan. And an action plan is a plan to prevent deaths and serious injuries focused on, for this plan, it's on all roads, but most of the roads are either county or municipal on Cape Island. And there are 8 required components of the plan. And this action plan will then provide an opportunity for future grants for implementation. That could be for design or construction of infrastructure projects or supplemental planning grants as well. So the Local Safety Action Plan really embraces not just infrastructure, which is the engineering piece in the circle, but also enforcement, education, and emergency response, and then equity is considered throughout the plan. Development of the action plan will follow something that's called the Safe System approach. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but it's a internationally kind of accepted approach to roadway safety. Federal Highway has adopted it. It's being adopted on all the safety action plans. And really the key here is there are 6 principles on here. And generally it's not just about where a crash is happening, but it's about recognizing that humans are vulnerable and they will make mistakes. And we want to create redundancies in safety opportunities, so if one measure fails, one countermeasure fails, something else will pick it up and somebody will be taken care of and will be protected. So, and in those blue wedges of the circle, those are the primary objectives: safe road users, safe vehicles, post-crash care, safe roads, and safe speeds. So I'm going to just zip through that, but we can talk about that later if somebody wants to talk about that. So where are we in our path to getting the plan done? So we had a steering committee meeting in March where we landed on some emphasis areas for the plan, and we'll follow back up with that today. We're on today's topic, talking about candidate locations and non-infrastructure strategies and the goal. We will be coming back to this committee in August, focusing on those items, really trying to get this draft plan close to being done at that point. An opportunity maybe for some focus group meetings in between now and August, and then coming back in November to try to finalize the plan and the implementation plan, and then go to City Council in December. Questions about the schedule? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to turn it over to Julia, and she's going to give an update on the crash information.
Forward this one?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we're just going to do a little refresher on the crash data and provide a couple updates. So we showed this to you last time. These are all the crashes on Cape Island by severity. Generally, we're looking at fatal and serious injuries for this plan. So those are in the yellow and the light blue. As you can see, not a lot of fatal crashes, which is good. Do have some serious injuries. So based on what we showed last time, we did do a deeper dive into the data, and we did find an additional bicyclist fatality in 2019. So this is updated to show that, which is down at the bottom. And based on the original data set, the items, the emphasis areas, which are just crash attributes that we want to focus on, that we can actually do something about, are highlighted in the blue boxes. So those are the ones that were selected at the last meeting. And here they are again. So we have lane departure, drowsy, distracted, pedestrians and bicyclists, and intersections. During the last meeting, it was asked what the seasonal data looks like. So here it is. This is by the 4 emphasis areas that were selected. So we have pedestrian and bicyclists, intersection, lane departure, drowsy, and distracted all stacked up. And I'm sure this comes as no surprise, but there is an increased frequency of crashes in the summertime. So basically from June to September before it drops again. And interestingly, the pedestrian and bicyclist crashes happen in October and December, so not during the peak season, which was interesting. So I'll give you a moment to look at that. Yeah. This data is from NJDOT's crash database. So they collect all the police reports from all the municipalities. They're required to submit them every year. So the last complete year that we looked at was 2021. They have not announced that 2022 is complete, or 2023 for that matter. So we kind of stopped at 2021. I'm hoping 2022 is approved and considered complete this year. We can always update the data to reflect the new information.
Okay, so that's the source you have to go from. If you're not getting it,
Otherwise, we have to go to each municipality and request the crash reports,
Okay,
which we're
and-
not really looking at either.
right, I guess that was my question, was that you really don't want to, you're just waiting for the big picture.
Correct.
And not go individually.
Correct, yeah, it does take some time to sit and read all the individual crash reports for 5 years of data for multiple municipalities.
And the municipalities can't give you that? If your main source doesn't get it, then that means that the municipalities have not,
They have not
Sent it.
submitted it, yeah.
which means probably they haven't put it together, correct?
That would be my understanding, yes.
That's historically a problem statewide.
Are you able to make any sort of contact with them?
The DOT
Is-
has a person that is one of their primary roles, is to continually contact the police departments to submit their data.
Okay,
No, we didn't do it ourselves personally, reach out to any of the towns.
okay.
Right,
Yeah.
Thank you.
you're welcome. Whoops, I went too far, okay. The other question that was asked was about low-speed vehicles, golf carts and stuff. So again, using that same data set, this is kind of where all the pieces fell, except I took out passenger vehicles because that's the predominant one, so you can actually see the other vehicle types. There is one moped shown there, we suspect, and I don't know for sure, that that's probably an e-bike. That's not a category in the police crash report form right now, so they may have selected the closest option. So we do have, in that data set, we have one, we'll say e-bike, a bicyclist, and a golf cart. Nothing came up as a low-speed vehicle in this data set. So that's that. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I have another quick question. So,
Sure.
somewhere I saw a report that they just referred to it as wheeled, non-motorized well, I guess then that eliminates the e-bikes. But just talking about the scooters, the electric scooters, things like that. But we're just, so there was it was the big picture of all these wheeled things. Is that something that you've looked at? I'm trying to think where I saw that, what they called it, but it basically incorporated all that. But I guess that's another software data issue that.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about I've heard rolling, rolling vehicles, things like that. But this data is based off the police report, as Julia said. So the police report that's been created, the NJTR1 form, doesn't break it down into those elements. So this is what
Yeah, these are the
we have to work
categories.
with.
Okay.
So I don't know if ATV was an actual ATV or maybe just a really souped-up golf cart.
Yeah.
Again, we're not looking at the individual police reports because that's a very time-consuming process. So we're just looking at, the data as it was recorded and as it was given to the state. Any other questions on that? Yes.
I just wondered, I couldn't see the charts, but a neighbor of mine was seriously injured coming out of Silverton Sailors Park on September the 3rd, 2021. Is that reflected in your information?
It was a pedestrian. I don't know the crash type.
Pedestrian hit by a car, yeah, coming out.
It's possible. I don't have all the details for.
Be specifically stated there. What you showed.
No.
We're pulling from a database of crash records that New Jersey DOT has that basically is information they've compiled from the municipal police department, so we don't have the details on the specifics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We're going back to Dave for equity analysis. You can have it.
All right, let me take that one. All right. All right, thank you. All right, equity analysis. So I'm going to try to walk through this slowly. So the Safe Streets and Roads requirements for an action plan, they have to address these things. So we have as I mentioned, I think in the last meeting, there is an eligibility worksheet, self-certification, that when you submit for an implementation grant, you have to certify that you're meeting all these requirements. And one of the requirements of an action plan is that it addresses equity. Specifically, these 3 points. Number one, and if folks can't read it, I will read them to you. Equity is considered in the development of the plan using inclusive and representative processes. Number two, underserved communities are identified through data. And 3, an equity analysis is developed in collaboration with appropriate partners, including population characteristics and initial equity impact assessments of proposed projects and strategies. So, proposed projects, you are looking at the equity impacts. Okay, so those are the 3 things we need to make sure we address in the plan. So we developed an equity analysis. And what we used was, there is a tool out there, US EPA EJ Screen tool, which uses the US Census Bureau American Community Survey 2017 to 2021. And you can do some really nice quick analyses. And what we did was we put together an analysis for Cape Island. And their analysis from the EJ screen is based on census block groups. So there's tracts, which are larger. So Cape Island has 2 tracts, but then when you break it down, there are actually 8 groups, which is a little, more granular level. So you can see outlined in red are the census block groups. I don't know how they were determined. I can't speak to that, but that's how they're set up. So this is what we looked at. And what we did is we looked at, there's some reports on underserved populations. And the next slide. So on the left are underserved populations. I think there's one I left out, which was under age 5. I didn't include that one. But there's the other ones listed: low income, people of color, 65 or older, unemployed, home ownership, less than high school education, persons with disabilities, and limited English-speaking households. So when you look at the island as a whole, and based on that EJ screening tool, said the population of the island was 4,765 full-time residents. So in the center column on that table shows you the percent of the population for each of those underserved, blocks of people. 22% of the population low income, 24% people of color, 29% 65 or older, and so on down the list. So the third column, percentile in the USA. Let me take a moment and explain that. So what that is doing is comparing Cape Island. So that percentage, for example, low income, 22%. How does 22% low-income population relate to all the census blocks in the country? Is that about the same? Is it more? Is it less? So if you're at 50th percentile, you're about in the middle, right? You're in the median. If you're lower than 50%, it's probably less. If you're over, you're ranking a little bit more. So I highlighted in that third column, 65 or older, 87% percentile. So that percentage is higher than 87% of the rest of the country in terms of having that percentage of population is. So what that's telling is 65 or older is a big population in comparison when you look at it in terms of proportion. Unemployed, 57% percentile, not percentage, percentile. Limited English speaking households is actually showing 57%, so slightly over the median. I don't say average, the median. So it's how that percentage compares to other census block when you look at the census blocks of all census blocks in the country. Questions about that? I want to make sure everybody understands that. It's a little bit complicated. Okay. No questions? You stumped?
I have one question.
Yeah.
So when you check all the boxes for the application, do you focus in on the ones that are higher, or do you have to check the boxes for every category?
So it's not really a checking a box. We have to show we do an analysis, but then in our plan has to go in to say, hey, here's our analysis, and we drafted a document to say, here's what our analysis shows. And then we have to show, like, how are we addressing it? What are we doing? What have we chosen to do?
But you can target those three categories that you choose, rather than equally target all of them.
Right. Now, this is the island as a whole.
Yes.
So then we went to the census block level. This breaks it down into each of those groups. And this chart will show you for each of those census blocks. Important thing to look at these census blocks is the population number. So the far left, you see the population's 363, 878, and so on. So the populations, and even if you look at the one all the way at the bottom, is 236. So there's not a big population. But what's in color is showing those populations that exceed the 50th percentile for that census, in that census block group. So, for example, if you look at limited English speaking, the blue, so that wherever it's a blue dot, it means that it's greater than 50th percentile compared to the rest of the country. However, when you look at that 236, I think the number for that, and I have the breakdown here, I didn't put it on the screen because it's a lot of numbers to look at, but as an example, I think when we looked at what was the limited English speaking there, I think Spanish was 10%. So 10% of 236 is like 23 people, right? So it's not a lot of people, right? But it's, it's a decent amount. It's 10% of the population. So it's something to keep that context in mind. So it's maybe high on the percentile, but you also have to look at the population of the census block group. So the other thing that, a couple things to point out, 65 plus is 6 out of the 8 census block groups. You're over the 50th percentile. And in fact, when I look at the percentile numbers, most cases it's in the 90-something percentile. So that's a big population that, we should be thinking about as we go through this. The other thing I would mention also when you look at the, where it says 1242 over by the Coast Guard Training Center, which includes those streets and roads where the housing is, right? So that area was, has people of color and low income. So there's a couple low income areas too. So it's something to think about. So where does this go? So a couple things to takeaways we put out here for consideration is one is outreach and inclusion. The other one is maybe countermeasure considerations when we're doing things. So outreach and inclusion, certainly 65 plus. There's, how do we make sure we get an opportunity for those 65 plus to have a voice in the plan or be included so they are aware. Low-income communities as well, people of color to a lesser extent in the one area, less than high school, and limited English-speaking resident populations, which is primarily Spanish. There are some others, but they're not a small number, but there are other small, Russian, Arabic, some things came up, but they were very small percentages. And countermeasure considerations, again, 65 plus. So as we're doing countermeasures, think about that. So as we're developing crossings or other infrastructure, we think about that population and, consider them. And then limited English speaking, if that makes sense in a certain census block group. So that's kind of the takeaways from the equity analysis. Any questions, thoughts, comments?
Just a reminder, anybody does have a question to use the intercom.
So we have I have some other data, but I can share if we needed to, if somebody is interested in more detailed breakdown, but okay. All right, so that's our equity analysis. We are now going to move on to candidate locations, and I will turn this back over to Julia.
All right, well, how did you? Somehow you went back several slides. I don't know how. Okay. All right, so to pick our candidate locations and project recommendations, we followed two analysis approaches. The first one we call a hotspot approach. This is more of a reactive approach to looking at and analyzing locations. We look at crash history and see where the frequency occurs higher than in other locations. We look at mitigating past crashes. And we usually come up with specific location countermeasures. So road A is, the recommended improvement is X, Y, and Z. And we also do site-specific benefit cost analysis. So we look at the cost of the improvements compared to what the safety benefit would be, and we come up with a number. Anything over 1 usually means that the benefit outweighs the cost. The other analysis that we do is called a systemic analysis. This is more of a proactive approach. So this is, it boils down to a statistical analysis where we look at all the roads in the system to identify characteristics of the roadways that could be a potential risk for a crash. Not necessarily that if the crash has already occurred. So we look at specific characteristics, lane width, straight road versus curved road, speed limit, things like that, and we analyze the data based on that. So we're focusing on risk, not necessarily crash history. Doing this, we can implement low-cost countermeasures over a larger group of roadways and intersections. And it's more of a network, I don't want to say holistic, but I did. So holistic view of the locations. Yes.
I've said this at least at every meeting. I said again.
You got to turn on the mic.
I said this at least once every meeting, and I like that you do the data analysis and the hot spots, but from a statistical standpoint, there's not enough data to actually say, well, this is the worst spot in the thing. Absolutely not in a place like this. I like that you're talking about a systematic approach. I'm interested to see how you're actually going to do this. My mind works maybe a little different. I say, all right, how can I mitigate danger? Well, where are the dangerous streets? Would you want a bicycle on Lafayette, for example? No. Get people off of Lafayette, it'll help. Broadway, do you want people on Broadway? No. What's the alternative route? Where do people want to go? If I live on Broadway, which I do, and I want to come here to this building, how do I get here safely? And how do then, once I have a safe route, how is that communicated to people? I mean, people are here, it's at a week at a time. How do we let people know? Do we, can we go to Google and say, if they press this in, this is the bike route to this area? How do I get from Cape May Point to the harbor on a bike? How do I just park my car? Those are the things, I mean, has anybody, again, I mentioned this before, why don't we all get on a bicycle and let's see what happens? Say, I want to go to the lighthouse from here.
So your point's a good point. So as part of the action plan requirements, we have to do a data analysis.
Oh, no, I
right?
understand that.
Right,
Don't
but
misunderstand.
also part of it is stakeholder engagement, which we're doing. So it's a combination of both. So to your point, the stakeholder engagement gets the input from the community of also what is important. So we're doing the data piece. We're going to show you based on our data analysis, this is what's coming up, but we're also open to hearing what the stakeholders want to include in this as well. So your point's a great one, and that's why one of the things we want to hear from you all.
So the question I have is, do you guys actually go out and, search the place on your own as engineers and as data analysts and as experts in this area? Do you spend any time on your own without the community input looking at the city and the flow of pedestrians, bicycles, LSVs, et cetera?
So for this plan, we haven't gone out and done any field reconnaissance at this point. We are looking at the data. What is the crash data telling us? We're looking at, there is information we do have about roadway characteristics, which is used in the systemic analysis. We don't have to go out in the field for that. We can,
Right.
and that's what Julia will explain some of that to you.
But will you down the road, or?
I think maybe the point is, once we decide if there is what are the projects, when we have to, at some point, we're going to have to, once the projects are identified that are the priorities, we're going to have to identify some potential countermeasures and cost estimates, and that may require us to go out in the field and look at when we get to the project level.
And I'm sure that, trust me, that there's going to be a lot of input from everybody else here. They do have their ideas of where hotspots are.
Right.
Sent you that,
Yeah.
right?
So we're,
Pretty much have,
there was your
Last meeting.
discussions we had of what were important areas, and I think we want to hear that again today. What we're going to show you, what the data shows is some areas that we would recommend, but we also want to hear of those other areas that, what else you would want to include in the plan.
right, which I think we did send the last meeting, right?
I think we took some notes on that. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
know if you actually sent us anything. I don't
Okay, I'll
remember if you did.
double-check.
Okay.
Yeah, my question was, do we understand where all the issues are?
I'll make a standing offer. Anybody who wants to go out on a bike ride with me from anywhere to anywhere, spend a morning, and I will show you all the spots that you need to see.
I'll go-
no problem.
I'll go with you.
And I think it opens your, you understand, it may not show up in the data where there's a crash. I mean, I know where the fatality was. That is a bad spot because it goes from a bike lane, no bike lane, the road's undersized, it's bad. So that's Broadway. You don't want people on it. So I'd be happy to show you any routes you want. We already know that Sunset's going to get fixed fall of '26. So that's fixed. But how do people from downtown Cape May get to the harbor? How do you get to the Seaview? How do you get to Lobster House on a bike? These are the questions you would ask somebody at your hotel or here. There's no way you can do it without
Yeah,
fixing
and those-
signage, street
right, and those-
lines. And these are not expensive
Yeah.
projects. It's just direction.
And those are important points to hear, those kinds of things, what should be included in the plan. So, yes, those kinds of
So
things. can
standing
be-
offer, anytime you guys
Okay.
want to spend the time.
Okay.
Any other questions about the analysis approaches? Okay. So to select our candidate project locations, we came up with a scoring criteria. So what we did is we looked at the network screening list, and again, this is a list based on the data where the crash history is occurring. It comes up with a score, and then everything's ranked. So if you rank 1, you have the highest crash frequency, number 2, and so on and so forth. So we assigned a score depending on where the roadway or intersection ranked. So if it's in the top 10, it got a score of 3, 11 to 20, 2, 20 to 50, 1, and anything above 50 got a half a point. If we had any stakeholder interests that we were aware of, it also got a score of 1. And then if that network screening list location also happened to overlap a systemic location based on our analysis, it also got a score of 1. Any questions on that? So this is what the map looks like based on that scoring criteria. I apologize, it's kind of hard to see from far away, so I tried to zoom in on the one side where there's a lot of stuff going on. The red is a corridor that came up on the network screening list. The orange is a pedestrian bicyclist corridor, and what that means is just that it's only looking at pedestrian and bicyclist crashes, not that it necessarily has a bike lane or facilities or anything like that. Similarly, the red dot is a intersection, the blue dot is a pedestrian bicyclist intersection, and then all the yellow, either the lines or the X's, are the systemic locations that came up out of the analysis. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I guess just want to take a moment, just make sure, give people a chance to look at this. So again, the yellow is the results of the systemic analysis. So there's not necessarily a crash history. The other ones are basically the red and the orange and the blue and the red. Some of them, you'll see them overlap with the systemic in some cases. But the red, orange, red, orange, and blue, I guess it is, are coming up based on crash history.
Correct. And I apologize, I thought the TV was going to be closer to you guys.
Yeah, if I can see that map correctly, I'm looking at Elmira and then Leamy, but I'm looking at Broadway where somebody was hit by a bus and killed, and it's white. It's not even marked. So I don't understand how that fits into your data, goes onto that map.
So again, we did the scoring. So if the location, and this is, again, based on older data, so if it happened after 2021,
No.
no, okay.
So
So
it
then
happened
it may have,
basically at the corner of that orange line where York and 626, which is all the way in the left corner, that's Broadway. That may be, along with Lafayette, that's the most dangerous road right there, and it's not even marked. So I would mark that.
okay.
From a systemic standpoint, obviously, the data isn't.
What's the location again, you're saying?
Broadway and York.
You have a pointer I can point to? You see where the orange, do you see the orange where it says
Little
York?
short orange
Ave?
strip at York, yeah.
Okay. At the end of that road on your left is Broadway, which
Yep.
is County Road 626.
But this includes all the crash data that you can look
Yeah.
at,
Correct.
the pedestrian or the bike paths.
That's right. This is not just bed-bike focused.
Yeah, and it's also.
Killings, somebody getting hit.
It's also
A death?
ranked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'll go back. Yeah, so if it didn't get a score of 5, essentially, it's not shown on that map. And that's where we look for your input, where if you say this is dangerous because of X, Y, and Z, or I don't feel comfortable, then that's when we, because your input is still data, right? So this is what all the crash data is telling us, but that's only part of the picture.
Right.
It looks like Stevens to Seagrove. Is that one of the colors? I can't.
Yes,
tell what-
that's a systemic area, yeah.
That's the systemic one? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's why I'm wearing a hat. I want to sue a vault spot.
But then you
No, no.
could have watched, but then you wouldn't participate.
Normally drive into Cape May during the summer.
Or bike,
Forget that.
because there's no safe way.
Anyway. Okay.
All right, so, sure. Sure.
No, okay, now I am. Lighthouse Avenue. From Sunset all the way down to the state park.
Okay.
Lots of dangerous behavior there with bicyclists. I'll just give,
Elaborate on the danger?
well, I'm not saying it's resulted in a crash, it's a potential, okay? So I'll give you an example. Yesterday at Seagrove and Lighthouse, there was someone waiting to get across the road. They were on a bike, they were stopped, so I stopped to let them do it. So it was a mother with a child in a trailer, followed by a grandmother on rollerblades pushing a stroller and like a 2 or 3-year-old on a bike, and they occupied Lighthouse Avenue. They were into the road,
Sure.
going down the street. It's,
Okay, so
It's a-
it was their behavior. One, a rollerblading grandma is awesome. We'll just get that out of the way.
What
But
I'm
you're
saying
saying they used the entire lane width?
well, they used, because the grandmother's trying to protect the young child on the bike, she's in the road next to him.
Gotcha.
Rollerblading with a stroller in front of her.
Okay.
Now, granted, the cars can go around, but we have slowed it down there. The county did a project. But I routinely see people who have no idea where they're going, coming up to that road and having no idea what the traffic is like on that road, thinking it's a safe road.
Okay.
So, that's all. I'm just pointing out
Yeah.
what he's pointing out.
And what is the traffic like on that road? Is it heavily traveled?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's why the county was willing to do traffic calming for
Okay.
us. So that did help some, but I'm
Okay.
this just feeds into you wanted some observations, the eventual wayfinding, sharing the road, looking at systemic potential.
Sure. No,
Kind of thing.
that's exactly what we're looking for.
That's the same as Lafayette Street, too.
Yeah,
Well,
I've
sure, yeah.
heard Lafayette come up a couple times, yeah.
I think
But-
sometimes you keep talking about diverting people, but people are going to do it anyway.
Exactly.
So my point is that we should have that infrastructure in regardless. People think we're encouraging it by doing the infrastructure, but bottom line is, they're going to do it anyway, so we should do it right. We should do it.
Sure.
That's-
And there's a
And of course, that's more
behavior.
cost.
Yeah, there's a behavior aspect to all that, which we'll get into, later, but that is good input, yes.
Yeah, just to underscore what Catherine was saying, we may be unique in our area as a tourist area, but there's many families on many roads all over town, and they haven't been on a bike in a long time. They don't know where they're going, but there'll be multiple people, a family of 5, instead
Yeah,
of just an individual
I actually,
cycling.
yeah, I saw it
So
on my
just to keep
way
that
in, there
mind.
was a little pack.
Yeah, there's a lot of
bicycles,
little
yes.
packs. Yeah, just,
But yeah, and again, they're probably on vacation, so when
Right.
you're on vacation, like, nothing matters, right? Yeah. Yes.
I was down at Key West, and we used GPS on our phone. Oh, thank you. Down at Key West, which everything runs like north to south and east to west, so it's not that difficult to figure out where you're at. But we just naturally used the GPS even while we were on our bikes to know where we were at. And I noticed that on Apple Maps, they had a really excellent bicycle feature. I know it's on Google too, but it just, for whatever reason there, it really worked well. And it was apparent to me that somebody had worked with Apple in regards to, it really, it made some roads red. Like, yes, you could take this road, but it's clearly a dangerous road. And you could recognize pretty quickly why it was marked red. I wasn't sure if that was something that we could do, talking about way signage, and certainly way signage matters, but with the amount of tourists and the age groups that are on bicycles especially, I think a lot of them are starting to use more GPS apps
Sure.
for bicycle, use.
So you could enter a destination from where you were?
Yeah, so I entered a destination, and then it was like, you've probably seen where there's like an icon for car, bike, walk. If I pushed bike, it really was a nice feature that was kind of almost 3D. And it was apparent that they had really worked on this in Key West, that it was like, hey, don't go on these roads, go on these. And the roads that it took me on were beautiful and quiet, which was perfect for bike riding.
Sure.
And I used it the rest of the week just because of that. Really,
Right.
not necessarily, I didn't know how to get there, but take that extra 1 to 2 minutes and you were on a much safer road.
Sure. So that's a non-infrastructure strategy that we can discuss later on in the presentation. I do want to get to the infrastructure strategies to get through that, but we will come back to that. Okay. So based on the map here, we identified 3 potential projects. Now, keep in mind, we need to prioritize our first round of this plan, so we don't want to take on too much, because we want to actually accomplish something and have actions, hence why it's an action plan. So we only picked 3. There is an opportunity, obviously, with your input, we can change them. That's perfectly fine. So I'm just going to go through them, hopefully relatively quickly. So the first one that came up was the intersection of Lafayette, Bank, and Decatur Street. I know this is an old photo. Since then, I think there's been some bike improvements on Lafayette. But it did come up as number 10 intersection on the network screening list, and it also came up during our systemic analysis, both for intersections and the corridor. So you can see we have very narrow roadways. We have an offset intersection configuration. We don't have any pedestrian crossing warning signs other than the guy in the middle there, which half the time people don't see, or it disappears or gets knocked over. So there's nothing, on the sidewalk side. We also have a different angle looking at the intersection. So Lafayette is running left to right. You do have 2 lanes from the other side, one for a left through and one for a right turn only. I'm not sure, based on the traffic volumes, if that's really necessary. Sometimes when you have people stacked up next to each other at an unsignalized intersection, they block the view of others. So that could be something that we can look at. So again, we have offset intersection. There were also showers installed on, that's Bank. I'm going to get confused.
Bank is
Yeah,
at
that's-
the bottom.
Yeah, Bank,
Bank's
okay.
at the bottom.
Okay. The other thing I noticed was that the marked crosswalk on that far side goes into a utility pole and doesn't actually go into the ramp.
It's been redone.
Yeah,
County
I'm sure it's been.
Greatly
yeah.
improved it.
And then hopefully the curb ramps were also redone because they're not very clear. They
They
don't
all
have the
meet now.
detectable warning surfaces, stuff like that. So, again, since we base this on old data, if it turns out that there's nothing additional that we can do, we can always select another location.
No, that it still needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Particularly, you can see the gazebo up in the top right there.
Yes, that's the park, right?
Yeah, to the left of that, that whole one-way turn lane is, we've discussed trying to get go to one lane and get a two-way bike lane through there.
Sure.
If we can get the routing.
Yeah, I personally don't like double lanes at stop conditions, again, because you kind of block views. Even when it's a single lane, if it's really wide, generally what I do is I actually pull over to the right so people can't come onto my right and try to turn right while I'm trying to look at traffic. So that could be something that we can look at as well.
Yeah, it's major because it's downtown.
Yes.
And between delivery trucks and things like that, somebody's going to have to be really creative to try to accommodate all that. But it's just so important because that is a key area.
Sure.
So I'm really happy that you've addressed that.
Okay.
And I live down the street on Bank Street, so.
Oh, okay.
And I ride my bike all the time, so I know what's going on around there.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on this one before I move on to the second location?
Can I ask one more general question? For the analysis, and I apologize, I haven't been at as many meetings as a lot of you folks, so I just want to make sure that we include the future plans of the county on Lighthouse Avenue. I'm sure that's been discussed a little bit, but also the Lafayette Street Park, because that may be a way to traverse, and I just want to make sure that that's part of it in some way.
Yeah, so we're just identifying the project recommendations now. If you agree with them, then they would become actual projects in the plan, and then in the next phase, once the plan is adopted, you would actually go through and do your analysis, look at plans that are ongoing or future plans, and come up with basically some concepts that would address this intersection, but also take into account anything ongoing or future.
I think the important one really is the Lighthouse, excuse me, not Lighthouse, Sunset Boulevard, making sure that we have the county plans to you all to make sure, you know, that we fit into those plans in whatever way we should.
Yeah, projects would be identified.
Okay. That's okay. We can always, if the county already has a plan, you know, we can always identify it in your plan to make sure that it's documented. So I'm going to move on to the next location because I know I'm probably running over time at this point. So some of the recommended improvements could be pedestrian crossing signs, maybe looking at curb extensions to get that down to one lane. You mentioned bike lanes, so we'll add that to the recommendations. Maybe looking at some curb radii revisions. Some of them are really big, and maybe they don't need to be that big because that would then reduce the pedestrian crossing time, so less time in the actual roadway for the pedestrians, things like that. And again, we identify it as a project, it goes into the plan. Once it's in the plan, then you can go through and do all these analyses. So I'm not guaranteeing any of this stuff. These are just recommendations to look at. You would have to actually do the study and get more data besides the crash data. So the second location is Ocean, Elmira, Leeming. I think I missed one. I think it's Landis at some point. From Columbia to 6th Avenue. So that was a number 7 corridor. You can also see down towards the bottom that it also overlaps a systemic corridor and some systemic intersections, which are kind of hard to see, but I think there's one at Broad and, Broad and Elmira. And then the one up there should really be at Park but sometimes GIS and coordinates don't always work together happily. So that is the next project. So here's the corridor on the aerial. The pins are the limits. I did flip it a little bit to fit the whole thing on the screen. We have the 2 signals on the east side, and then we have stop conditions on the west side. Now, there were some improvements. I think there were bike lanes in one section. We're just going to focus on this section for the purpose of discussion. Okay, so here we have a couple skewed intersections on either side. We have the 4-way stop here. We have the 2-way stop here. So maybe some recommendations would be to look at adding a shoulder. Sometimes when you put in the edge line, it helps with people parking closer to the curb so they're not sticking out. It also helps to visually narrow the roadway. When you visually narrow the roadway, psychologically, it kind of tricks your brain into driving slower. So that could be one option. And then maybe shortening the pedestrian crossings. Again, you'd have to analyze everything for the curb radii and truck turns and stuff. Yes?
I'm just trying to, that's the corner, where's the skewed intersection? That is the corner of Leaning and Park. Okay.
So that's Park and that's
Project, we're looking
Broadway.
at a project for Westgate May. We're supposed to run sidewalks down both sides of those, to the top of the screen, all the way around
cool.
Broadway. And we already have bike lanes.
Yes.
We're looking at maybe potentially actually not doing it on one side and then doing down here, down that shack. In front of but that's all going to get redone
Okay.
in that area. So we'll see how much safer that becomes. I honestly don't think that that's.
But don't forget, when she's just pointing out a segment within this whole corridor. So
Yeah.
it's a long corridor. So just as this meeting, this is just kind of an example of what they'll look at in it. But they're going to look at the entire corridor from Landis, Leeming, Elmira, all the way out.
Correct,
through
correct.
that entire corridor branch. So even on the previous one where they just had kind of brought up the Decatur Lafayette Bank intersection, they're not just going to look at that one intersection. They're going to look at that entire corridor of Bank and
Yeah, we're gonna
Decatur
look- yeah, we're gonna look
corridor
at a certain
as looking
portion.
at that. That's the priorities. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that she's just kind of looking at this now as, hey, these are examples
Correct.
that we could look at within this segment of that overall corridor for
Yeah, I
recommendation number
understand,
2.
'cause it's all about wayfaring, and it's getting people from one point to another and returning
Yes.
from one point. Because we have some areas where it's great one way, but then you can't get back. So,
Sure.
And I'll agree that the left intersection there, that's skewed, it
Yeah.
is, I use that cut through a lot, that route to get to Cape May. I do not
Don't
go-
admit that.
Why? Why? Because why would I go on the main road? That's the way,
It
the
is?
back way.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but trying to turn or cross the road there on that left skewed intersection is difficult. There's a curve, cars are coming fast.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I do think there's probably some merit to looking at
Sure.
improving that.
Yeah, and then the other side is kind of offset, but that's at a right angle, so that's a little easier. I did look at, some of the street views. It was older data, but there was clearly a car that was so far out into the road just to see, to make a turn.
Absolutely, all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Paul, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, these are just examples. We could be here all day talking about every single section, so I just wanted to give some examples to, get the juices flowing. And again, these are just recommendations. Everything's got to be studied, disclaimer, caveat, whatever you want to call it. This is just, for discussion. So anything else on this one? And again, we have all the residential driveways, so that's also a concern, people backing out of their driveways and things like that. The last location that we're going to discuss today is Washington Street from Ocean to Sydney. This is a came up as a number 5 for the pedestrian bicycle corridor. So again, this specific one has a higher incidence of pedestrian and bicyclist crashes. It also, a portion came up, it's a little hard to see, but down at the bottom was number 8 corridor for, so that's all crashes, and then portions are systemic as well. So, spinning you again, here is the aerial, the pins for the limits. You got a couple intersections that are signalized. I don't think there were any four-way stops from what I saw. I think all the side streets were just two-way, right? Okay. 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is pretty typical down here. It's 20 now, I think, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, so for discussion purposes, we're going to look at the area circled in pink. And here we have a street view. Again, these are, you know, a little dated because I didn't get a chance to come down here beforehand to take pictures. This is obviously in the fall. So you obviously have a pretty narrow roadway. You have parking on the one side, which does switch depending on where you are on the roadway. I think when I was coming down, it was on one side, and then it switched to the other side. So you do have an intersection where there's this weird jog going on. And you have all the residential driveways. So again, you have people pulling in and backing out, trying to see around parked vehicles, things like that. So one of the things that I noticed just, you know, looking at this is you do have the parking spaces marked out, but they could be enhanced. Just, again, putting in the edge line could visually narrow the roadway. It would also help delineate the parking area better. You could still delineate the individual parking spaces, but sometimes having a little bit of extra paint allows people to see where to park and how far over to park. And you have the double yellow. Some of the signals along here could use a little revamping. I think one was on a span wire. Doesn't have pedestrian signal heads. So that gets a little, I noticed some people were a little confused on when to actually walk and cross.
Well, that's up at Ocean and Washington, because each traffic direction, there's essentially 3 phases, coming out of Washington, Ocean, and then a pedestrian
Right.
signal. So yeah, that probably could use definitely some more signage, especially on the pedestrian side, to
Yes.
make sure that pedestrians know to only cross when they have the pedestrian signal to cross, because they had the tendency to walk with the traffic signal.
Correct, yeah.
And when they don't really have,
Yes.
that's not permitted at that time. So that probably would need enhancement. The other thing I would want to bring up, and I meant to bring it up during the crashes, so there was a lot of bus and truck vehicle crashes, and I'm
Sure.
assuming that crash data includes property damage crashes, and a lot of the truck and bus crashes along the Washington Street corridor are hitting trees.
Oh,
So
okay.
you can see in the picture right there, you actually have a good picture of that tree leaning out.
Yeah.
We have a lot of large truck to tree
Okay.
accidents, especially along Lafayette Street and Washington Street corridors. So, you know, that would probably be a topic to have a discussion on this, because we do have, like, for our bus permits, established routes that buses should only take, but trucks don't always follow it.
Okay.
And when the trucks get it onto the side streets, they routinely have conflicts with overhanging trees. So that's probably something that we should probably just make a note of and
Okay.
identify as it's a different hazard, but
Sure.
the street trees are pretty common in Cape May.
Yes, and they're also
They know about it.
a very difficult conversation to have. Yes,
There's actually some signage on Washington about the low-hanging trees.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying
right.
that-
I mean, if it's
It was
low
an attempt.
branches, maybe some tree trimming, but I mean, I wouldn't recommend taking trees down. That's not a good idea environmentally, so. But maybe stuff like that, maybe some additional signage. So those are the 3 locations for discussion purposes. We did get a couple more locations, which is great. Is there any other locations that you would like to include in the plan that we can take a look at? And you don't have to answer now, you can think about it. Go ahead.
Can I make a suggestion? It seems to me like out on Stevens Street now with Beachcomber Farm and the Little Creek Winery, and it's such a place where tourists will often ride their bikes.
Sure.
The whole like Fourth Avenue, Stevens Street, like that whole section. I'm on Stimson Lane, and we see a lot, much more traffic on our street than we ever have before.
Okay,
I think GPS is sending people that way, but
Sure.
I know it's not as much bike issues on our street. But once you get down Fourth and Stevens Street is just a mess. And because it is a country road, people feel like they can spread out and be halfway across the road. But I think, that would be an area that should really get looked at.
okay.
And
So Stevens did come up on the systemic
Yes,
list.
it did.
Oh. It's the
Yep.
Seagrove, yeah.
Yeah, the problem there is you go off of Fourth, which basically has a bike lane.
Mike?
Fourth actually is a county road that has a shoulder, which also can be considered a bike lane.
Right.
You hit the stop sign at Bay Shore, and it's a narrow country road. And,
Okay.
and the places where people are going, Ray's Farm, Beach Plum Farm, Willow Creek, are down that road. And so there's nowhere, you really can't share the road. We have to. So if you're stuck behind a bike, you're stuck behind a bike.
Sure.
That's the issue.
Okay.
If I could, we had a resident come to city council with an issue in particular that he thought was a very unsafe condition, as evidenced by a friend who was badly hurt. If I could just let him speak to the location for a minute and address, if it's a hot spot or not, at least it's something to be considered, but could we take a minute and let Peter talk about, Peter Garcia?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be very brief. It's a crosswalk coming out of Soldiers and Sailors Park on Columbia. And a neighbor of mine was seriously injured there on September the 1st, 2021. September the 3rd, 2021. And it's very unique. When I went to look at the location, I thought it was very unique because coming out of the park at that point, you have no leeway. You are stepping immediately into the car lane. There's no parking, lane and to give you a little grace. So I don't know. It's an accident waiting to happen, and it's also an accident that has happened. And I don't know if there have been any others, but it's the only one I know of. And I think there's a need. It's the kind of thing, if you put a stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk in the middle, it's too tight. Somebody's going to run over it in a day. So there's a little grassy patch in the park, at the end of the park right there, where a sign warning pedestrians and then warning drivers possibly could be put right there. Maybe a sign that it's a historic block that maybe HPC could even approve what it's made of and what it looks like. But it's a very dangerous spot. And if you can just focus on that in your plans or look at it, maybe have a picture like you have here.
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
could that be
Thank
another
you.
crosswalk there?
There's a crosswalk.
There's a crosswalk off the corner of the church.
No, it's not the church side, it's the Columbia Avenue side that crosses it, you're crossing straight over to the John Craig House.
Right.
Coming out of the park there.
Okay.
The other side is the same situation, but people have to turn around, and you don't have cars that come in from Ocean, they already go through a crosswalk, and they're ready to fly through the second crosswalk, and that's how she got hit.
Okay.
And, obviously, it needs a warning for both pedestrians and the driver. And
Sure.
I don't know, and you need an appropriate sign because it's a tremendously historical block.
Sure.
Yeah, what happens, it looks like when you're coming, you turn right off of Ocean onto Columbia, you go around a little bit of a bend there, and right there's the crossing, is right there. Yeah, yeah.
You should, this crosswalk itself should make people aware, but there's also no signage at all to make, try to get you going. And I think in that situation, there needs to be signage for the person coming out of the park too, just to stop and think. I even wrote up a little hand sign that I think you could have, if you want, I'll give it to you. One side would say, one side would say that for the driver, and the other side would say that in the park. If you want, you can keep that. It's just,
I have one other
Thank you.
location.
Sure.
Is, you talked about Ocean, Washington, where Washington ends.
Yes.
And the need for improving the light system pedestrian crossing. A block away at Ocean and Lafayette on the corner there, you've got the bike shop, so you've got a lot of bikes coming out of there.
Right.
And then you also have the bus station, so you have a lot of pedestrians there.
Okay.
The way they have the turning lanes right now, and there's no green boxes for bikes alerts, we did get one green box by the elementary school.
Okay.
Yay, we got one. But there's definitely a need for, I think, a lot of green boxes in town to alert people. But that particular intersection is tough because the right-hand turn, it's one right-hand turn, and then it's a straight and left-hand turn.
Sure.
The bikes invariably are in that right-hand turning lane and going across when you
Okay.
have another car coming down. So that really needs to be addressed from all sides, from all corners. But again,
Sure.
it's the bikes, the bike shop, and the station, the bus station. So you got a lot of bikes and a lot of pedestrians, and that's really tight in there. But
Okay.
Anyway, that's another note.
Great, thank you.
I'd love to see you come up with a creative solution on Perry Street. As you're leaving Cape May, headed towards West Cape May, there's parking on both sides of Perry Street. Bicycles think that they can go, they do go that way. If there's a creative solution to keep them off of that stretch, there's going to be a traffic calming circle put in down the road by the county in front of CVS. Looking at that whole area as a potential, keeping it flowing would be a
Okay.
big help.
Okay. Somebody got that? Perry Street?
Perry,
No, I didn't.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
that would be great.
it's actually, when you're leaving Cape May and you're going down Perry Street towards West Cape May, entering West Cape May, it's that little stretch there, there's what we call Little Myrtle behind, which could be used possibly for bikes. I don't
Okay.
know, but I'd like you to look at that.
Okay.
If you could, thank you.
Okay. So you guys are comfortable with, we call them roundabouts now because traffic circle has a very negative connotation in New Jersey, which has also shifted into Delaware, but that's another story. So do you like roundabouts, mini roundabouts? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
That has 5 different spokes, as you can see.
And they're
So you
offset.
have a double stop. You stop and you stop 20 feet further. You can't see cars are coming. You can't cross on one side of the street. You have to go over by the Walmart yard and cross over there.
Okay.
That solves a lot of problems.
Okay.
We actually talked about in one of the meetings, the bike trail in Cape May County comes across the bridge and it continues down Broadway and it turns on Central down Park. Okay, that's Park. The line that we need to put signage and lines all around that roundabout and then continue it hopefully down Grant down to the beach because it's a direct shot. It's the old railway line.
Okay.
So that would actually be a very safe way to get from, there's a campground in West Cape May that starts right at Central and Broadway that would go right down there around, all on bike lanes, and if we can get it some more on Grant, that would be awesome. That would take everybody right down to the beach, and they won't have to go on Broadway with
Okay.
their,
The one thing that I only noticed on the.
I'll get you to the mall, don't worry.
On the roundabout is that they didn't really address bikes going through there. I don't know.
So,
I talked to
Notice
Bob,
that.
I talked to Bob Church at length about the size of the lanes so that we could actually put bike
Right,
lanes on
right.
there. The lineage is something that they do at the very end. We can determine what's going
Right.
around that.
I'm a
So-
snowbird down in Florida, and
Okay.
outside of Naples, there's a little town, and they put in, there's 2 circles, roundabouts. One's a 1-lane roundabout, and the other one's a 2-lane roundabout. It's definitely, the 1 lane is much safer.
Yes.
And there's not a lot of room anyway, but,
Yes.
but it's really good. They have the hawk blinking light
Okay.
there. I actually attempted to get in touch with the Florida Department of Transportation, send an email, they didn't get back to me, because I was trying to get the plans for that. but
do they have Oprah requests down there? You could probably do that.
I don't know, but I can send you the
location, yeah.
that location, and maybe you'll be able to find something from that, but it's really good. And it's very attractive, too.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. So, I mean, I could talk all day about roundabouts, but what I will say is for bikes specifically, generally, the roundabouts are designed so that the vehicles are going so slow that the bikes are supposed to go into the traffic stream, which is why there's typically no marked bike lanes. But again, that could be revised. But that's the general premise. You're going less than 25 miles an hour. You know, you're all circulating in the same direction, so the bikes are supposed to go into the traffic stream. Now, I've heard, people aren't always comfortable with that, so that adds another element, but.
Just 2 quick ones. Safe Routes to School is a project that we have going from the Coast Guard base to the Cape May Elementary School. I think I want to make sure you guys have that plan. Paul, if we can make sure we get the Safe Routes to School plan. I think the plan's really good. It gets people safely to Madison and Lafayette, okay, but not to the school. From Madison to Lafayette, I don't think the plan's good, to be honest with you. And that's where I'd like to see if we in this group could come up with a better plan of getting the kids across Lafayette Street. The school owns some of the property that I think we could look at.
Okay.
What they have to do now is, everyone in this room knows where you're kind of facing DeSatnick Real Estate on Madison, making the left onto Lafayette and then into the school. I really think the school owns some of the property that's pretty close to directly across the street from Madison. I think we could put in a pedestrian pathway or bicycle pathway to get them directly into the parking lot, which I know the parking lot's not the best, but I think personally, I think getting people off of Lafayette Street as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, that's basically the most narrow part of Lafayette
Of
Street,
course it
right,
is,
right
yeah.
there at the junction with Madison, which is one of our major streets. So, but anyway, I do think that if we could help finish the end of the Safe Routes to School right there, on the opposite end of it, and just remembering that, I should know this number, but the high percentage of our students are at the Coast Guard base.
Okay.
The other high percentage is at the public housing. So at public housing, we have some ideas of going through the park to get to school rather than going down Lafayette Street. I just want to make sure that that's kind of ironed out and in our park plan, which is really more on the city, but I think should be part of this plan too. If we have our kids arriving safely from public housing and our kids arriving safely from the Coast Guard base, then we're really in a good position.
Okay, great, thank you.
We've discussed in years prior about that path that would go behind the school. So that's also an extension from Broad Street, which is where the public housing is, to go behind there. And then the kids that are coming from the Coast Guard station up Madison and going parallel to that. The one thing at Madison and Lafayette is there's a fire hydrant right there. So I think where you're talking, so it's more complicated, but there's a fire hydrant there. Just an FYI. Because I'd love to see it, but there's a fire hydrant there.
Yes.
I have an issue with Westgate Lane. Broadway is obviously a very heavily used route. We're trying to get pedestrians and bicycles off of it. But people are going to use it anyway.
Correct.
And from just south of the curve up to Central, there is no sidewalk on the east side of Broadway, so people are walking and riding on the shoulder. And people cut the corner on that curve. And so if there's a way we can mitigate that cutting of the corner, because if you're walking there and the guys coming up behind you on that curve,
Right. Sure. Okay. Take a look at that.
Okay, I've got one more on Broadway. Sorry, I'll make
Should we just do a look at Broadway?
Yeah. So when you're coming in from out of town from the bridge, coming down Broadway, it's where Homestead, just past where Homestead Realtor used to be. I forget what it is now. But what happens is, so you have a bike lane when you're out on Bay Shore and you're coming into town. And I've brought this up before, is there cars that are parked. So you're coming from the bridge, you're coming down, and there's a bike lane, and you're coming towards town just before the campground, and the bike lane disappears because cars are parked there. Now, my understanding is there's a handicapped child that lives right there.
Okay. So,
I guess for parking purposes and stuff like that.
so they have a designated
So
spot.
my thought is, okay, put a green box that's going to alert you to come back into the lane, and then you can, when you go farther, then you can get back into the bike lane in front of Ducky's. But that point right there is, all of a sudden there's parked cars, and you got to go out in the street. And if it has to be there, those parked cars have to be there, that's where you get your, green boxes or some sort of green thing that guides, because that's for bikes. The green
Sure.
is for bikes, to guide them out there and then bring them back in again. Same thing on Beach Avenue, which the county just did, at the end of Grant Street. There's a bike lane, they put a traffic calming sidewalk thing that kind of sticks out.
Curb extension.
And so the bikes are coming on their little lane, and then all of a sudden, there's a sign that says something about, merge in, but they need some sort of, again, green, markings that those, and it alerts the drivers that there's bikes coming back into the road there, so.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, well, they did do that, but I think at that particular point, you really need the screens, a lot of green.
Just that Broadway should be, the whole length of Broadway.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it sounds like at this point. Okay, I'm going to move on to talk about some of the systemic stuff really quickly, and then we'll get into the non-infrastructure strategies. So, based on the systemic analysis, again, it's a statistical analysis looking at risk. For the segments and corridors, we looked at the lane departure and drowsy and distracted emphasis areas. Those are the most common on the segments. Basically, what came out of it was that local roads, speeds 25 miles an hour or less, which is most of the roads, with a straight alignment were the riskiest. So those are the characteristics. Now, that's a pretty broad group of roads down here. But some of the recommended improvements could be installing wider edge lines or just installing edge lines, doing the enhanced parking space markings, bike lanes. It's not up there, but it's very clear that that could be potentially a systemic treatment. Things you can have in the toolbox are the wayfinding signs, which have been mentioned a couple times. And then provide lighting, and by provide lighting, I mean like over the roadway lighting, in addition to pedestrian scale lighting, because sometimes the pedestrian scale lighting doesn't necessarily illuminate the roadway enough for people to see maybe a bike at night or something like that. Again, in the toolbox, because that is, expensive, and sometimes you have to work with ACE and things like that. Moving on to the intersection, so that was for the intersection and the pedestrian bicyclist emphasis area. Basically, stop-controlled intersections on local roads, either two-way or four-way. Things for those to create a project, maybe upgrade or install pedestrian crossings, making sure you have them on all approaches. Some of them may only have it on 3, put it on all 4. Again, provide lighting at the intersection, especially at night, making sure that you can see a pedestrian in the crosswalk. You could update to a traffic signal or a roundabout, since it sounds like you guys are cool with roundabouts. And install intersection warnings and improve visibility wherever supported by MUTCD. So that's, advanced warning signs for a stop, an intersection, like a side street, a signal ahead, that sort of thing. And then improve visibility would be, making sure that the sight triangles at the intersections are clear, that you can actually see traffic coming in both directions. So that's what I have for systemic. That could be implemented over a whole group of roadways. I'm not going to go into all of the roadways here, because again, we could be here all day.
Maybe that's where we could, it seemed like there was a lot of conversation of the transitions from where bike lanes are to not. Maybe that's
That could
something
be-
that we
yep.
could just generically put in as a systemic overall, how to treat those transitions with enhanced lane markings, green transition,
Sure.
and maybe that way that would cover all of the different streets within Cape Island of
Yes.
how to deal with those transitions from bike lanes to share the road to nothing.
Yeah, that is a great way to apply that on as many roads as you can. So any other questions about the systemic? When you get the report, we'll actually have a list of roadways that came up that fit into these categories, which are going to be probably quite large lists. But that's the gist of it.
Only thing I could think of, it goes in with the wayfinding signs also, but if there's some sort of graphic sign or added to a sign that designates safe biking route, just something you could easily, it shows a bike on green, something, so that helps people know this is a good road to be on.
Sure.
And it tells the drivers, oh, there's going to be bikes on this road.
Yeah, usually, yeah.
In your experience, have you ever had anybody ban bicycles on specific stretches of, you can't do that?
No.
Okay.
You can't ban it.
Because
You can strongly discourage it by providing facilities elsewhere, but you can't ban them outright, unless you're on an interstate. I think that's the only exception, where, you can't have horses, bikes, or pedestrians on the interstates, or the parkway, or the turnpike. But, okay. Great conversation. Yeah, great stuff. Thank you, everybody, for all your infrastructure input. We're now going to move over to non-infrastructure strategies. Dale's going to take over. I'm going to take a break from holding this microphone. Thank you.
Good morning, all. All right, now we're going to talk about non-infrastructure strategies. So basically, this is education, enforcement, items like that. We're going to review what was in the 2016 Cape May City, Cape May Point bike ped study. Okay, so we're going to review some of the strategies and make a determination whether we keep them or delete them. If we keep them, then we got to figure out what action needs to be taken and what is the target time. All right, is it short term? Yeah, and then we also got to find out who's going to be the lead, who's going to do it. Okay, we just had this same thing with the Cape May County local road safety plans, where we're trying to identify. We had an idea of a target and an idea of what we wanted to do, but we couldn't find people to take the lead. So it is an issue. So and then we have some other potential strategies which the Cape May County local road safety plan is also considering. We're probably not going to get through all of them today because we are running a little late here, but we may want to have something like a virtual meeting to go through this to have people weigh in on it, so. Back up. All right, the first one is education and encouragement. So the 2016 recommendation was to distribute public service announcements and brochures on safety topics. And it emphasizes distribution to tourists and seasonal visitors. All right, so the status is, I know some information is given
some of
out.
it- we've done a lot of
Website
bike-
has quite a bit.
Yeah, we've done a lot of bike safety promotion as well as low-speed vehicle. Those are two initiatives that we've done a lot of outreach. Police and the city have done a lot of outreach on those two topics to different civic groups and businesses.
So it's one that we would want to keep, okay? Now, the city has one, but the island consists of 3 other communities, so okay. Okay. So obviously, we'll keep it. We'll continue the action. It basically covers all short, mid, and long term. And then the Cape May City Police Department is the lead agency on the keeping up with the public awareness of this program. So that covers everything but the Lower Township piece. So. Because the Cape May City Police Department covers both West Cape May and Cape May Point, so.
We don't really have a representative from Lower, is that correct? They
yeah.
haven't responded?
Yeah, unfortunately, the administrator is away this week, so, so we have been in contact with him. We've been discussing it with the administrator over there, so. Some additional stuff was back in 2020, the bike map was published. I don't think it needs any updating until maybe Sunset Boulevard project gets done, then maybe you'd want to revisit that after that's done. Would be my suggestion, but your thoughts?
I think we're waiting for, we were waiting, number one, for the county to get all that work done around town. We've discussed it, but before we publish an update on it, there's a lot of improvements that needs to be done, I believe. So we're kind of waiting on that. We can discuss that.
Yeah, we're keeping it.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at an update down the road, which would be probably midterm.
We just
It may-
haven't published anything new.
And maybe one of the projects that we come out of this is, not all, maybe this is one of the non-structural, is maybe to do an update to the bike plan for the Cape Island, to focus solely on updating the bike plan and the bike map as a future project to get funding for.
Plus, we were also hoping to do a digital version, since most people prefer that, except old people who like paper map. But that's part of it, the digital part.
Like the mayor was talking about
Yeah.
with Google or Apple Map.
Yeah.
Yeah, so who would be the lead? I guess, Paul, would that be the city again? Because you were the lead on the last one, so. So that basically covers, highlight the ped and bike improvements. So, like I said, I think we're looking at midterm. I mean, this program is for 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, Dave. So, your plan is meant to be a 5-year plan, so that's what you want to look at. So when you're looking at these as short, mid, and long-term, so.
Just to clarify
Yep.
the timeframe, I don't think there's a set requirement on these action plans for timeframes, but
Okay.
it's generally a target we've been using on some other ones, 4 to 5 years.
Thank you for the clarification. So, and then some of the other items are promote and market biking and walking assets, which, like I said, the city website does a great job with that. And some of the comments that we had on the infrastructure piece about the wayfinding, that would also go to help market, bike and pedestrians. So apply for a bike or walk-friendly community. There's 2 different associations. There's a bike-friendly community association. Their application is 89 pages. So a lot of the information that we're generating here would actually go into the application because there is a section on equity and a few other things, maps and stuff like that. So, and there are, I believe, 480 communities throughout the United States right now that are bike-friendly communities. Like I said, it's an 89-page application, and the applications are due by June 25th right now for this year. So you may want to think about that for next year. And then as far as a walk-friendly community, doesn't look like there's been much activity done with that group since 2022. There's only 82 communities in the United States that are walk-friendly communities. There is an association, I think it's American Walking Communities, that provides that certification. And their website doesn't have anything after 2022, so. So,
Are we keeping that one, or are we letting that one go, or is this?
so, yes. So do we want to go after this bike-friendly community certification?
We looked into it a while ago, and like you said, it's 80-some pages, and my belief, and I think that some of the other bike committee, pedestrian committee felt that we needed to show improvement. I know it's a grant thing, if you have this, but we kind of tabled it because at the time, we weren't anywhere near bike or pedestrian friendly. So we would be filling out this long application with only a few things that we've done. So that's why we tabled it.
So what's the thought now going forward?
I think it's something we should wait until we get the Sunset Boulevard thing done. That will show a major interest on our part, and I think we could do something then, but up until then, I can't see pursuing it.
At least a year or two is
Does
what I'm saying.
anybody have a sense as to what it would take to influence the map makers like Zach was referring to down in Key West? Why couldn't we develop in conjunction with, maybe not Apple, but, one of the map people putting together the bike map, the pedestrian map, all online.
Like
Anybody can use it in
You
their phone.
mentioned that, making it
Yes.
digital with
Yes.
Google and Apple. So yeah, having those conversations to have it actually in your mapping app.
Okay, but I mean, you could almost eliminate then having to publish a bike map every year.
That's true.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, so I think we got that one that's a go, I
That's-
think.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So-
To go.
We're on the bike walk-friendly community.
What's,
Yes.
know,
Sounds
what's,
like keeping it, but maybe long.
or is there a value to it? What's, is there something?
It's grant money, correct?
We don't know that there's any grant money.
Yeah. I I think it might just be,
It's a marketing,
yeah.
it's a tourism promotion, it's a marketing promotion, about being a
Okay.
friendly community.
We have one no. Anyone else?
I'd rather push the walk-friendly community aspect because it's a beautiful place to park your car and walk, and it's
Yep.
very walkable. So I'd be interested, I'd look into that personally, that's a good marketing.
So maybe the action is to investigate
Yes.
walk-friendly to see if it makes sense, as opposed to saying, yeah, we're going to apply to be a walk-friendly community. Maybe the action is look into it to see if there's a value in applying to become a walk-friendly community. Maybe.
Just with the maps, even the speed limit is wrong on some of them. We decreased the speed limit to 20 miles an hour on a lot of the streets. A lot of the maps still show it as 25. I think the city looked into how we could correct it, and to be honest, didn't go very far. So I don't know if we can do that as part of this process, but again, some of the streets and GPS aren't inaccurate, and that may not sound like a big deal, but a lot of the modern cars today, the speed limit's right on your dashboard. If you're using maps, it might even warn you if you're going 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. But if it's got the wrong speed limit, it doesn't really matter much.
Well, for now, we could just, the bike, we had a subcommittee bike map people, and so we could just shortly readdress that, if that's what you would like to see be done. We can do that. And
If
if you want to get in on that, please.
If you're looking at Cape Island, I say bicycle walk-friendly community doesn't apply. It might apply to parts of West Cape May, it might apply to parts of our town and, say, the city, but as an island, it's neither yet. So
Okay.
I wouldn't waste time on it now.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be for the whole island, it could be the individual community doing it, so, yeah.
Did we land on?
Yes or no on that?
Or
one?
did we land on a new action? Is it to investigate the value of becoming a walk and bike friendly community? Is there a value, and maybe that's the action, and if it's worth pursuing?
So who's going to do the action?
Yeah, and who would lead?
Yeah, who would be the lead?
Well, Hillary, can you look at the pedestrian, correct? And then if it's okay, the bike and pedestrian committee can discuss it in the next month or so and come back to you what we decided, what we would do, which one would be to slightly update the map, whether we publish them or not, or just get them into a QR code is another thing, but we can discuss that in the next month or two, if that works for you.
I don't think
So-
we need it.
Committee.
I don't think we need that detail.
Right.
We just need to know what action.
We're gonna put in a
You're gonna
plan, what is the
investigate it.
action?
That's all we need to put into the plan,
And
okay?
we'll do that at the next meeting and get back to you. How's
So if you want to resolve the value before we finish the plan, then we'll
that's
resolve the
fine.
action won't be to investigate. The action will be keep it or delete it or what we do. Yeah, so.
Do you need an answer on that?
Well, if you, before our August meeting, we're,
Okay,
yeah, we're coming back in August,
by
so,
next meeting, we'll let you,
yeah. Okay,
by our bike committee meeting.
okay. Great.
All right. Any other things on this group here? Okay, school-related activities. So I don't think we have anybody here from the school system at all here, but integrating education programs in the school curriculum program. I know there's certain schools do have some bike training or bike safety classes they do give from time to time. Sometimes they bring the police officers in to assist with that, or the community officer. So, is that one that we want to consider?
Isn't that already happening, has been happening? Yeah. In the school, with the police.
So,
So yes.
So we'll keep that one, and then the police department is the lead on that, and it's active. Encourage walking school buses and bike trains. This is gathering up the kids all together at one time, going through. Sometimes there's a bike rodeo that they have at the schools and things like that. So I imagine they probably still do that here with the school.
That ties into the state routes to school.
Yep.
I have to say there used to be, just based on who was in school at the time, a larger group of students and parents going from the Coast Guard base to the school. Now it's more a couple of individual groups, to be honest with you, but they did have some bike trains from the Coast Guard base especially.
So that's another one we'll keep. And then who would be the lead? Would PTA? PTA? And then utilizing Safe Routes to School and I forget what the acronym is for TMAs, traffic. Yeah, resources to encourage biking and walking to schools. So, and you're already doing with the Safe Routes to School program, you have that grant that goes from the Coast Guard base to the Lafayette Elementary School. So that is obviously keep. It is underway. And then the lead is the city or county. County. Okay.
And what about the TMA? Do they do any educational programs for students or the general public?
It's the cross-county connection
Cross-county connection,
is the
thank
one
you.
for this area. Yeah.
Okay. Would that be something that you would be interested in investigating, starting something down here?
The bike committee has had some relationship with, what is the organization, state? Paul, who was the guy that we had? We did have oh my gosh, my mind's a blank. We do have a connection, and Paul Vasari, who's not here today, he's had a closer connection with big county routing, but one of the things he does stay in touch with is, the fellow's name is Paul, and he came in here, and we tried to do a little kind of a clinic thing, and I think if we decide to go forward with that next time we would have longer preparation and advertisement on it. But they actually do some clinics of, do a group of bicyclists, and we actually go through town, and he instructs, and it was a short thing, but it was very informative. My thought was even to do at the convention center or incorporate something is do an evening of bike education. But Paul, it's a different organization in the state that that we can continue to be in touch with, and that I think would help.
Okay.
the
And it's not
goals.
cross-county connection?
It's state. It's state, and they're all over the state. They work with different people. I can get you the name of
Okay.
it.
State DOT, you think?
No, I'll find
Okay.
out who it is. But we do have an outside person. It's another big bike safety organization. But I'll get that name to you.
And through the Kiwanis Club, we did some outreach, providing bike lights for kids. Right, are you still doing?
Lights, and then every summer at National Night Out, we give out 500 sets of bike lights for free.
And who does that?
The Kiwanis.
Kiwanis.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, that's great. So,
And the whole issue of people riding with bike lights at night is really important to this group, that
Yep.
maybe that should be back with awareness. Yeah.
Well, we'll go back and put that in the notes.
Yeah.
And I don't think the bike rentals come with lights, because I do see people at night on bike rentals out our
been an
way.
issue.
Yes.
Is
That's been a
They all have to have
request.
lights.
That's been a
Okay.
request,
It's
and
just a
it,
question of enforcement.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, it's been a request with the bike shops that they should have lights, and the police department is working with them,
Is-
suggesting it.
well, is it a should or a shall? Because if they're violating the law, I mean, they should be a little more
From what I
pushy.
understand, there's a law that says that rental bikes that are rented overnight
Uh-huh.
have to have lights on them.
Okay.
If it's a weekly rental, they have to have lights.
I'm assuming that's a law for all bicyclists, probably, if
It's
they're running
probably,
at night.
yeah,
they
it's
should
probably a
have lights.
state law.
Yeah.
So maybe,
So every
uh,
bike they rent should have a
Yeah.
light on it.
We'll have to
Maybe-
look at Title 39 and see if it's a state.
yeah, that's what I was just gonna see, because if it's a state statute,
Yeah.
then,
So they
then
just
maybe
need-
that's,
It needs to be enforced.
Right. It has been addressed.
Oh, we got enforcement coming up. So right now, we're in education and
Yeah, sorry.
encouragement, so. So. All right, we'll move on from this one. Education, training. And I guess we've talked about partner with community groups, police, business, advocates for providing bicycle training. We just spoke about that, about the group that you have coming in, that statewide big safety group. So obviously, that's one to keep. It's currently going on, and I believe this committee is the one coordinating that, or
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
your state bike safety group that comes in to,
Yeah.
yeah,
Paul
Paul.
Mikowitz, and I'm trying to find the information
But
here.
you coordinate that? The committee does?
We
or-
have done that, yes.
Okay, so that would be who would be, take the lead or be involved in that program, so. And then training on complete streets implementation to local officials, planners, engineers, and public works staff. And Paul, you probably had complete streets training. I know I have, but I don't imagine our local officials or planners have had that kind of training. It is, you can get an extra point or two in your applications if you have complete streets, if you adopted a resolution for complete streets. So that's something to consider. So at this point, there's nothing going on with that, and we're not looking to keep it. Okay. So that will be the delete, so. This is, now we're getting into what Cape May County's local road safety plan is doing. Obviously, this is your group is part of that group overall, because that's covering the entire county. And it's just dealing with county roads and municipal roads, correct? Yes, that program there. So they had similar emphasis areas as our group does, all right? So their strategies were conduct a social media campaign through leveraging through our community volunteer groups. So they were looking at that for lane departure, and then they were also looking to do the social media campaigns through city and agencies' web pages. So, which I believe each one of the communities here is doing that right now with their social media on their web page. So, and then, but should that be brought over to additional emphasis areas? And I believe right now here, you guys are doing bike and peds, so that would be another box that we would check for our program, so. You have an elementary school, so you really don't have student council or student organization, so it really doesn't, that last one really doesn't apply. And then educate through public programs. They talked about, for lane departure and drowsy and distracted driving, and then education through schools for lane departures and trying to educate the young drivers and the consequences of speeding and aggressive driving habits. So these are, like I said, the check boxes are the ones that the county is moving forward with. They've identified, all right, that they want to continue doing this. So And I assume that we would want to do the same thing with the program, public programs. Like I said, again, with the elementary school, granted, your high school age goes up to lower regional or, so.
These are not specific actions, these are
Yeah.
the strategy level. So we
Strategies.
just wanted you, for food for thought for you all, if there's other, so to get you thinking, if there's other actions that you want to include in the plan.
So this is signage with variable message boards. Obviously, the county has a lot of variable message boards that they have out to notify of whether construction or even with safety messages. You see on the parkway, they constantly have those messages on the board saying, you know, keep your eyes on the road, not on the phone, stuff like that. So again, these are areas that the county program is looking at. So is there any additional education and encouragement areas that you would think, you could think of?
Paul, a couple of years ago, with the police department used to have a sign when you came into town blinking with notes, and they used to put bike at night, have a light, and have that part of the rotation. And I don't see that happening anymore, so. Okay, but that would be something if we,
That's been going on
okay.
for 6 months.
Excuse me, I have a gentleman over there.
Yep.
Educational materials that's involved in the biking committee and when you do, is there any warnings or education going on with respect to the hazard of getting doored? You know, where drivers open their door and the bike comes along, and which personally happened to me very recently. And like something like, don't just look when you pull out, look when you get out, and for bicycle riders, you know, keep your distance. Is there anything that addresses that hazard in your materials or educational or these you know, announcements and stuff?
There are signs. You can get signs that show the car and the door and a bike coming along. Last night I drove down Beach Avenue. Unfortunately, we do have some new bike lanes in there, but they're right on the door. I mean, there's a New Jersey law now about a 4-foot clearance that's supposed to happen. And the county put these lines in on Beach Avenue this month, and the bike lane is right by the car. I think part of this, what they could have done was make those parking spots a little narrower and also make the streets narrower so you still have some bike spread. They even put the striped lines, white boxy kind of lines to separate between the lane and the bikes, but it puts you right into the cars. So it's going to be a concern this year, I think, with getting doors, but
In my personal situation, there was only one car on the block, and I was riding in the parking lanes, and just passing that car, and boom, it opened up.
yeah.
And so, it seems like it's just be a general topic that's always in all the educational materials.
Well, the 4-foot law is the one that is addressing that. And we have all sorts of stickers that I got from this Mike Mikowitz. So the committee has addressed that. But unfortunately, very disappointed on Beach Avenue and that was the county.
This gentleman's talking about where they put signs out there just to warn people, look before you open your door, those kinds of things.
Yeah, there is signage.
Maybe bike shops, you know,
Yeah.
and everybody who rents a bike
Yeah.
is a driver too. So
Yeah.
Yep.
usually is.
Yeah.
Just to say, just show that hazard, because I've seen it happen in Washington DC to a kid, and kids get up a lot easier than I did, it's, and I've heard of incidents where people just, it's a game in there, you know, life for them, that an accident. It just comes right at you, you know, happens all of a sudden.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Dale.
Any other educational encouragement type of thoughts that want to consider?
Did we cover, in general, cars, drivers sharing the road with pedestrians and bikes? I mean, just focusing on them understanding they're not the only ones on the road. I don't know. So if that wasn't in one of those things, that's
It was part of the, well, it was
somewhere in there.
considered as part of the public education
Right.
component, the public.
Yeah, I think the very first one was safety topics.
Yeah.
So that would be,
So-
it would fall, it could, that could
It could fall
in
on
there.
that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, most of the focus was educating people riding bikes, and I just was following up on what they said.
Educating the drivers.
Yes.
Everything focuses on the drivers, but the reality is, the onus is on the bike rider. You are invisible, and there's not, I've been to bike training programs and actually taught a couple of them, they don't focus enough on, you are the one that's going to lose if you get hit. I also took motorcycle training, and that is the first thing they say, nobody can see you. So just assume that that door is going to open. So if you see somebody, you see the lights of the car on or whatever, you know they're going to open the door. It's the onus is not only on the drivers, it's on the bike riders. And I think a lot of the accidents happen because the bike riders are just oblivious. And they take the brunt of the injury. If a car door, it's not going to hurt the car door, it's going to hurt them.
Yep.
Yeah, this coalition that we have dealing with Paul, they actually coach you when you're getting out of your car, not to open the door like this, but you open the door like this, and it turns you to look. I mean, they actually even have something, but people have to do that, so.
More, maybe it's being a little bit more specific than you want to hear here, but I really feel that when cars come into Cape May, particularly over the small bridge, you're coming in from lower, there really needs to be signage, not obnoxious, but I think that there's at least 3 things that visitors and everybody else in Cape May needs to consider when they come into town. Number 1, our speed limits are lower than every place else. So basically, pay attention to the speed limits because most of it's 20 miles an hour. So it's just pay attention to the speed limits. 2, one of the worst things we have in this city is that bicycles do not behave like they're supposed to, which is they need to obey motor vehicle laws. So again, it's that second message, and the third message is pedestrians have the right of way, 3 things that I think people need to, and it's like, and then you're here, relax, enjoy Cape May. But everybody just needs to take it a little bit easy, and I just see this, I'm not sure if it's the sign that we're talking about that's being repaired, or if it's something more permanent, which really points out, I think, the 3 key things in this town. So.
Along with that is, again, slow down and be courteous and be defensive. Everybody needs to be defensive. But that's part of education.
Yep. Okay.
Anything else? Enforcement now. Okay. Which I believe you have, through the police department, you have this ped safety enforcement program, if I'm not mistaken. Possibly, yeah. So we would keep that. Obviously, the police department would have take the lead on that, and then institute a community-oriented traffic calming campaign, which we just talked about, the signage is a possibility. So the question is, who would take the lead on doing that? Something like that. City.
Has anything been done under the 2016 plan as a follow-up to that one? Do we know, did anybody act on that one, community-oriented traffic calming campaign? Was there anything done?
Yeah, I believe a lot of it was addressed last year when they lowered the speed limits to a lot of the roads in
Okay.
town.
Yeah.
The county's come in and put traffic calming things on Lafayette Street, and also on Perry Street when you go there. So, yeah, quite a bit has been accomplished.
Yeah, and I think that the other strategy that the county uses is narrowing all of the roadways with the striping. You know, they've done that for our sake. They've lowered their speed limits for us, and they've also narrowed roadways, and they'll be doing that on Lafayette
So,
Street.
so speed limits is a non-infrastructure, which is good, but like narrowing roadways, those kinds of things, those are all infrastructure. Do we know of anything else that could be done that would?
In terms of enforcement.
Enforcement, or, yeah, that's right, it's enforcement.
Yeah.
So is there an action coming out of this plan that we would want to, or do we just,
Or do we say no?
do we keep this as a, you know, is there an action that we want to identify?
Well, it would just be reiterating to the police department to enforce is a big part of it.
They don't have the pedestrian decoy where they walk in, get ready to cross the street, and then if nobody stops for that pedestrian, they pull that person over because of the law that you've got to stop for pedestrians and crosswalks. Do they
I don't know if
do that program?
I don't know if they actively.
No.
No,
Do they have the manpower?
no.
Which is,
Which
yeah,
is the issue.
which is the issue, yes.
Yeah, well, we had, but last year, I think we had more we had more help during the summer at least. And we've increased the staffing of our police department. You know, we'll certainly try to do even more in the future, but there's, you know, there's help there. There's a little bit more enforcement, but.
I'll check with Chief and see if he still wants to do those things.
Right.
Okay.
All right. This is what the county has for strategy. Obviously, we talked about improving or implementing more enforcement. As mentioned here, manpower is the issue, the lack of manpower to be able to enforce. You know, there are, oftentimes they distribute traffic citations for specific campaigns. You know, obviously, the state does give out money for drunk driving every now and then, programs, things like that. But, you know, so they're looking at also emphasizing or having a strategy for more of these to alert the pedestrians or motorists. And then adopting traffic safety plans for the local towns, so, which would be addressing key issues, like you said, you know, slowing down, you know, share the roads with the pedestrians, or, I mean, with the bicyclists and stuff like that, so.
Dale, there's one thing
Yep.
that it's particularly to a resort town like ours, and that is our young people who are working in bars and restaurants who get off at night, usually dressed in black. They rarely have lights on, and they're going the wrong way, trying to get wherever they're going. It's a big problem that I see at night
Yep.
when I leave my store, and I don't know if that's something we could ask the police to look out for in particular, but I've almost killed a couple of people, you know, from just weaving in and out and just wearing black and not having lights on. And there are a lot of them.
Lights on the bikes.
Lights on the bikes, yeah.
Or
Yeah, so.
even some type of light
Anything.
clothing if they're walking too, because, yeah, you're absolutely
It's
right.
really
There are,
scary.
Reflective is the best.
Yeah,
Really hasn't been anything conclusively studied about the color of clothing. I got my ear chewed out about this from somebody, but reflective is the best.
and then the other
Even
thing,
a program that says, hey, here's a free vest.
yeah, they're not going to wear a vest.
Well, I think if we have the lights on the bike in the front and the back,
Right.
that would
Or-
take
or
care of a lot.
shine the lights
That would take
on
care
the-
of-
on the bikes.
Yeah.
a good step forward.
And the other thing is that kids on bikes going out to drink think that they can drink and drive because they're on a bike. And maybe some more awareness in that regard, that you
Yeah,
still are
it still-
responsible
it still counts.
as a
Yeah.
vehicle. Yeah.
Going back to the campaigning real quickly, is that the police department does do a campaign every year, and I guess it's ongoing, but they reward kids on bikes that are in the streets or whatever, that they have their helmet on, and the local, some of the ice cream shops give them coupons. So there is an ongoing, the police chief would tell you that would, I'm sure, continues.
Yep.
Yep.
And it's just for kids? What about
Well,
exposure to adults?
Yeah.
No, I was gonna go for the ice cream, but, you know.
Well, a
beer
lot
for
of
the
times, because they're doing that
You can't
for,
ride the bike after you have a drink, it still counts.
but it's also, a lot of times, because they're targeting the kids, the adults are learning. And you'll get a lot of kids that are reprimanding their parents for not wearing helmets and stuff. We've heard about that, so.
These are, these are the county, and we've talked about these, the last two of these. I imagine in the agreements for the renting of bikes, scooters, or the low-speed vehicles here in town, there's probably language in there that the city requires.
Yeah, I'm not, maybe there is language in there the city requires, but also all of the bike shops and the golf cart rentals and everybody, they all have brochures that they've agreed, that we've produced, and they have agreed to enthusiastically give it to their customers. And of course, the customers have a long list of requirements that they do have to sign off on.
Yeah.
And of course, we do the police department does do the third item there.
Yep. So is there any additional enforcement suggestions here?
I have a quick question about the crossings and stepping into the stepping off the street. The problem, I think, is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the law says that you have to yield to people in the crosswalk, which is kind of like, duh, yeah. But what people are doing is that they think that they can stand on the side of the street at the curb. A car is approaching, say, 20 feet away, and they think that they can walk into the street. But that seems to be the consensus of what they believe that law says. Is that correct? So again, it's education. But am I incorrect? Is that what you're seeing that's come out of that
So,
law?
Yeah, so the law is if it is an unmarked crosswalk, vehicles have to yield to any pedestrians in the street. They don't have to stop. If it is a marked crosswalk, they have to stop completely. However, pedestrians have to be in the crosswalk, so you have to step into it.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't do that because they're not comfortable with it or they don't understand. So they stand at the very edge of the curb, between the curb and the street, and expect people to stop. But technically, you're supposed to have at least 1 foot into the marked
Right.
crosswalk for vehicles to stop. And maybe that's kind of, not the best way to
Yeah.
write the law, but
It's a
that's-
bad
that's-
law.
That's the way it is currently written. So, education on that may be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, that could be.
Changing the
campaigning.
law
A
is
campaign, really.
obviously above
I see
us.
people, they don't even look. They're 5 feet from the street on the sidewalk. They just walk. I saw a pregnant woman do that right by the mall. They
Yes.
just walk right out.
Yes,
It's a bad law.
it's also a common problem.
But anyway,
Law here, so.
Yeah,
Let's get moving so we can get this program.
Yep.
These are just the other
Other
food for thought. Yeah,
suggestions,
yeah.
Encouraging or facilitating alternate transportation modes like the jitneys, stuff like that. And then if you go back to the original circle that Dave had up there,
Safe system approach.
the safe system approach, one of the topics is the post-crash care, okay, the emergency response and post-crash care. So is there any action regarding that item? Because we do have to account for that in our safe system approach here.
Yeah, I mean, we could, yeah, if there's an action, we don't have to necessarily have an action for this, but, you know, I just want to put these up there, and, you know, we're talking about alternative modes. I know there's a jitney that's in the area. Is there any actions that anybody want to consider to put in the plan regarding this? So basically promote jitney use through brochures and communications, and that would be like a city lead. You know, that's happened and we'll continue it. Okay.
All
right, we're almost done, folks. Yeah.
Okay,
Why, were you going to take it?
you told me I was doing it.
Oh, do it.
Oh, yeah.
Do it. Julie will do it.
You can do it, I don't care.
You know what? I don't care.
All right, so let's talk about action plan goal. You have to have a goal
Please sign, if
for,
anybody hasn't signed in, please, I hope we caught everybody that.
yes,
that already signed.
if you haven't signed in, please sign in.
Yeah.
You have to have a goal as part of your plan. You're not really graded on it per se, but you do have to have sort of a vision zero, let's say. So we have to come up with a goal today. So I'm going to show you a chart on fatal crashes. And this is a 5-year rolling average, so we did have to go back in time a little bit, but starting at 2017, now, again, you don't have a whole lot of fatalities, which is good. So you have a couple different options on setting your goal. You can do, stay the course and do a zero goal by 2050, or you could be a little bit more aggressive, and I do mean a little bit, and have a zero goal by 2040. It seems like a no-brainer, right?
Why wouldn't you have a zero goal by every year? I mean, so we had one, I forget what year it was, probably 2019. And when was the last one before that? Does anybody know? Do you know, Paul? Obviously, it's a rolling average, but it. Right. So why wouldn't our goal be never to have a fatal accident?
Yeah, it is, what she's saying, it's just you have to pick a date that you're going to get there by doing all the.
Right, right.
It's not an annual goal, so the plan wants you to set a target. So by the requirements, they want you to set a target for significant reduction in fatalities and serious injuries, or to get to zero. So you're not at zero now, you're at you're 0.4. So the question is, what's the target to get to zero or a substantial reduction? So we're offering up two options to get, you could get to zero. You could try to do 50%, that really doesn't make much difference, 50% or zero or whatever. So, we recommend zero and have a target. You could say 2030, you
Sure.
could say 2025, you could say,
Right.
2030.
So,
You want to do zero by 2030, which I think is pretty achievable?
You think it's achievable? Yeah. Okay, sure. I was going to pick 2040 because that was what you had up there, but 2030 is fine.
yeah, the current trajectory is 2050 based on that trend line, but.
Right.
But
Well,
we're trying to do something more, so we want to be a little bit more aggressive.
Right.
So-
right.
so-
And of course, I think the trend line is pandemic related, maybe. So it may be artificial, but regardless, let's just pick one. Yes. Go for it.
Well, just another aside that this organization, New Jersey Bike Walk Coalition, has a Vision Zero. Actually, it's New Jersey Alliance, but Vision Zero Alliance. So it's similar to.
Yeah, there's all different names for it. It all
but it's a big
boils
zero
down.
thing. It's-
Zero is the thing right now, and all the highways, road safety thing is there's zero initiatives. Yeah.
Right, yeah. There's Road to Zero, there's Vision Zero,
Towards zero deaths.
Towards Zero Deaths.
Oh.
You could call it what,
Yeah.
It's
whatever.
basically a vision.
That's right.
Correct.
That's right.
Yes.
So we just,
Just pick one.
which date do you want, 2030 or 2040?
30.
30.
2 for 30. Anybody else?
I would go 40 just because it seems more doable, because you have to actually implement things, and we don't have an implementation grant yet. So
Correct.
30 is just 6 years away, or less than 6 years.
Okay.
In terms of time frame of implementing projects to make a
Right.
difference.
That's, and see the results,
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
you think you're going to see those results in 6 years?
No,
Do we want to? Yes. Will we?
no.
Maybe not.
Sunset Boulevard.
Let's pick 2040. That's
Okay.
aggressive enough, I think.
Just remember, the crash data is 3 years behind.
That's right.
Yes.
It's difficult to evaluate when
That's
you're
right.
successful with.
That's
your
right. It could be trending up. Yeah, we don't know.
Right.
We could be, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think you are, but
We're okay with 2040? Everybody okay with 2040? Anybody?
I'm okay with it.
just for that, you're living to 100.
Just so long as you don't contribute to that statistic.
Yes. Watch out for doors.
Just don't contribute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't be one of
be a
them.
Statistic. Okay, so it sounds like 0 by 2040 is our goal.
Okay.
All right, that was pretty easy and painless. Okay, and now it's going over to Dave.
So we're just
Next
wrapping up,
steps.
yeah. So just click,
up or
just click the next
Okay.
slide. So really, we're going to be coming back in August. So we will have hopefully a good chunk of the plan drafted. And then we'll come back to you with this refinement on the candidate project list. We've got some other stuff to do, benefit cost analyses and project summaries. I don't think we're going to be working on that. We're not going to be presenting all that at the steering committee meeting. The one thing that we are working on is a safe system approach alignment. This plan review, so we're reviewing all the master plans and the county plans and looking at their alignment with the safe system approach and coming up with recommendations. Some of those may feed into non-infrastructure strategies as well, so there may be additional non-infrastructure strategies or actions coming out of that. Does this group think we should have a follow-up meeting on non-infrastructure strategies and actions? Or we can take what we heard today, we can put them together and come back next time and make sure that everybody's okay with it? Or if we can have a virtual meeting, invite folks from the community to talk more about those? What's any consensus from this group about that?
You're requesting a listing of all of the recommendations, is that what you're saying?
Well, we're saying that some of the non-infrastructure things that we talked with Dale, we would put them on present them, in a virtual meeting, and we would invite folks from the community, key people, stakeholders from around the community, if they wanted to join that and weigh in on those, and if they have other additional strategies and actions they wanted to add, we could hear them.
It might be a good idea so that you do get some of the other stakeholders involved that aren't attending these meetings.
Yeah, it's another equity outreach. We
Exactly.
could do that to make sure we hear voices from other communities. So I don't think we would just have to get the word out to them about having that.
Right.
And maybe a stakeholder there is, was it the Chamber of Commerce or to do outreach to business owners here about their employees leaving at night without bike lights and all of that, And they have non-English speaking employees as well on e-bikes going down the road in black. I've seen that, so you might want to get their
Is there consensus that we should move forward with that? Okay. All right. So that's we'll work on that and see if we can get that done. I don't know if we'll have that before the August. We'll see what we can do. I think we're supposed to come back. Forget what the date was. We're coming back here August 14th maybe.
Second Wednesday.
Yeah. So that's basically it. And then next time, we may see where we get implementation plan if we're ready to start talking about some of that. But this plan still has a lot of work to do on this. But this has been a great meeting today. We got through a lot Really appreciate it, even though we went over, so. So I think that's it for us. 14th is the next meeting, okay.
14th of August, right?
Yes, okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Paul, I just wondered if we had heard any information. George and I were talking about the end of Park Boulevard, the access to the Atlantic Electric right away. Justin was going to report on it this week.
Feasible.
Okay.
Did you get a confirmation that it was?
I'm just- See, Mike. We need something on letterhead.
Terry, thank you for sharing. We are familiar with the Bike Walk Coalition. We were actually
Okay.
just at their conference
Oh, okay,
a month or
okay.
so ago. They had one, so.
Yeah.
I don't know Paul, though. I know some other folks there, but.
Yeah, he's the one that came into town. and
Okay.
it was very, but like I said, we needed more planning.
So they're a nonprofit bike advocacy
Right.
group
Right.
in the state, so.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
they loaded with information and
Yeah.
trying to pull you in for different things,
Yes.
but we haven't been in
Okay.
communication with them.
No, that's good to know that they do that. I didn't know they did. That's great with that education work. If they come out and do clinics and things, that's a great
Oh, yeah,
strategy.
and Paul's very enthusiastic. Like I said, I forget where he lives in North Jersey, but he came down and
Okay.
it was really good. We blocked off one street to do just these little pointers in riding our bikes.
Okay.
So,
Great.
yeah.
That's great. No, we got a lot of information today. So we just got to put it all
Yeah,
together.
I was kind of hoping that, and I'll look again to see, because I thought that we had sent you, because we definitely have a wish list of
Yeah.
all the intersections. And some of the stuff has been done a little bit, but for instance, adding the concern with the dooring on Beach Avenue.
Yeah.
I just can't believe the county did that.
No, that's a good point you make. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have to go drive down there and check it out. Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
I
yeah.
wrote it last night.
Did you?
In fact,
Okay.
I only did half of it. I didn't go
Okay.
to the north end, but actually the south end is busier anyway.
Okay,
And from Broadway south to the point on the
Yeah.
beach road is actually city. The rest
Okay.
is county.
Okay.
So you'll see that, it has perpendicular parking. That's an issue about slanting, that still all needs to be addressed as well. And it's real wide,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people, a lot of bikes that go down there because the sun sets
Yeah.
down there.
Yeah.
So it's a busy area.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot, but I'll see if I can I'd like to see somebody coordinate it, but I can't do it. My husband's sick. I mean, I can
Okay.
only do so much
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
But I'd like to see some of these other, the point and to come up with their list of bugaboos rather than you get all these different ones that the bike committee here could organize that and then give you one document.